Hallo, hört ihr mich? Hallo? Never? Never worked? Hallo? 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 Okay. Hallo? 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 Ah, das ist egal. Das geht schon.
And hello, yeah, it works.
Okay.
Aber bitte nur eins verwenden. Weil, ich weiß es jetzt im Moment nicht, wir müssen es uns danach dann anschauen. Ja, ich weiß, es ist nicht so. Das ist jetzt ein bisschen blöd.
Sehr unprofessionell, ha? Sehr unprofessionell.
Yeah, so if you want to introduce
Do as you like.
I don't have a microphone, that's why I was looking. Okay, hello. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, which is Stephan Kulow, and he will talk about openSUSE release schedule NG.
Thank you. Good morning. The openSUSE release manager, some call me Papa, some call me release dude, some call me project manager, but it's basically all I am. And I want to talk to you about the problems that 12.2 showed, and very loud, and possible ways to solve them in the future. That's my plan for today, and I hope that we will have some more food for thought, I think was the title from Robert, and we have a BOF tomorrow to discuss your thoughts. So I would like to keep the questions for today at a minimum, and afterwards have some discussions. If you don't understand something in the slides, please ask me as soon as you have them, but general questions, please at a BOF or something. Okay, thank you. So, the openSUSE development process is happening in the openSUSE factory project, which is forked into the released version, that is 12.2, and now it's Dartmouth 12.3. And currently we have almost 6,000 source packages that are developed in like 140 development projects and are shared by over 300 maintainers. That is registered maintainers. This is not contributions, this is really people who said, I will maintain a package. And we have 6 architectures, if you count 2 powers and 2 ARMs and 2 AMD Intel platforms, it's 6. And so far, for 12.2, we had 1 release manager. So there's kind of a problem obvious, but I will come to that. So what we're using as a tool for the development, that's the build service. There are tons of talks that were on the weekend. There are even also today talks about build service. I guess most of you will know that, but just to verify, there's nothing that is outside the build service where we develop what we develop. Everything from sources to final ISOs are in the build service. We just download from the build service onto our mirrors and are done. This is a very important thing because it wasn't so in the past. So this, that you see behind me, is a picture you can find on the factory portal, if you go to the wiki, that is explaining the process of the factory development model. So you have a developed project where where pigs are developed. You can see all those geckos transmitting small pigs. They are developed here, are grown, and then submitted to factory. We have this developed project where cows are, sorry, this is very tricking me. You see all these cows and here the goose. And then it's all submitted into factory. And these groups here have their own development style, their own policies, their own communication channels endowed. They have, if you talk to the GNOME guys, they even have an infrastructure on top of the build service to make this process. So, but when I looked at this picture while preparing the talk, I figured, making penguins out of pork. Yeah, another problem kind of obvious. So when I told this story to a colleague, he pointed me to this comic, which is very famous, and because it's so famous, you can only find very old prints of it. But here it says, it's explaining a development process, I would say, and here is where the miracle occurs. So we have all these very fancy development process, and then you step into factory, and a miracle occurs. And we find the final product here. I find this very matching to how openSUSE is developed. So I put it into the talk. The main problem we have is, sorry? Nee, das ist mir zu laut. Dann mach's leiser, weil ich höre mich selber so laut. Ja, ich muss aber reden können, sorry. We have all these newcomers around, and we want them to be around. We want more of them. But the development process has to be working with more and more newcomers. That's why we created all these development projects to guide them to a smaller group first, and then come to this 400 group. So that's why we have created these development projects. When the development projects are done with their policies, we have a reviewing team by now that is reviewing the submissions from the development projects to factory before I see them. This was announced just recently, and there are 9 guys in there. If I look, I can find 2 of them in the room. Yeah, here Dominic, there's Sasha. So they are all around, basically. That's what I want to say. Before that, we had like 4, and it didn't work all the time. So Lars, sorry. Lars is also one of those 9. So we have 3 even. So that now we have 9, and it's working a little better. We also have a legal review happening that is currently basically 2 guys who need to review all the open source projects that for a random contributor look like free software, what the heck, but in fact they are very funny licenses you can come up with, and all these are real examples from factory packages. These 2 lines are actually 1 license from 1 package. They really release software like that. And that's why we have a legal team who's really knowing all these licenses by heart and know what combinations from what 2 licenses make a different 3rd license that is no longer incompatible with GPL or not, or with BSD, or it's really good to have them, because otherwise we might find ourselves in a situation where, let's say, GCC project says, no, you can no longer distribute your distribution because you didn't comply to our license. That's why we have this legal team who's also at that miracle position in the comment. So this is basically my home page. That is the factory project status page in the build service. It shows all the problematic or becoming to being problematic packages. And from this page, I generate reminder mails to all the maintainers. I'm trying to change positions. Huh? Okay, let's try that. So in the morning, more often I look at this page to check if there are new build failures, if there are old packages, if there are pending requests I have to ping people for because they don't read their Hermes mails, etc. And as I said, I generate reminder mails for that. So this looks now very GNOME dominated, but actually this was the time when 3.6 was still being prepared in that project. But 1 month sounds a lot, but it can be fine, but it doesn't have to be. So this is why it says an overview page. I check that, and then I go or talk to people or mail them, etc. So, okay. So one thing we learned from last year's conference in Nuremberg was that people work very often in a way that they submit something to their development project and check locally that it works, that it builds, but don't want to submit it before it also builds on the server, but kind of forget to submit it because at that time the build service is just slow and they don't get a build result very quickly. So it's stuck in the develop project. So Vincent developed auto-submit, which is then run by script now in submitting changes in the develop project. It is older than 7 days, I think is the current default. And it checks for a blacklist, for already submitted changes, for changes that were already declined before, etc. So it's kind of fancy mechanism that is very useful. Of course, it would be better if the project maintainers took care of this themselves. But as I said, there are 370 maintainers, and it's easy for 10 of them to forget. And so we have this tool now. As I already mentioned, we also got I also got the feedback last year that they want to know that they forgot something. So I'm sending reminder mails, and the idea was to send reminder mails on Tuesday and auto-submit on Monday, but it's still not submitted. Kind of the reminder mails were, the first ones got very good feedback. When I first sent the first reminder mail round, I had like 100 submissions that day, but the ones after that kind of didn't really bring tons of benefit. But let's see how it goes in the future. Let me know about feedback of that. So, another important thing is we have now 2 release managers. That is, I can go on vacation and factory still kind of works because Ismail, that's Ismail, yeah, he's raising the hand, is now not only my backup but also my co-release manager. So we're in heavy interaction on how we do things. A third thing we already did after 12.2 didn't really work too well was that we put more things than we used to in staging projects, where we in the past we used staging projects for big changes like GCC, and that's about it. But now we put I have an Apache update in a staging project. I have some project config changes in staging project. glibc update was in staging project. RPM lint updates were in staging project, etc. We still don't have that many of them, but it's very hard with the current tools to keep an overview of them. That's something for the future. So, one of the problems why we can't have that many staging projects is that the build service only has as many build power as it currently has. This is from build openSUSE.org/monitor. It's updated every 10 minutes. And you can see here, this is basically when I wake up. Sorry, no. This is when we check in big things into factory. And you can see that it takes years 16th, 17th, 18th. This is basically when the factory repository and stuff that builds on top of it is building. Then we have a snapshot repository, which is a copy of factory repository, which is then automatically updated by a script. And then you get another bunch of stuff built for factory. So it takes like 6 days from one check-in round basically to calm build service again. And it was nice that I could do this because when the conference started, everyone stopped working, and so it's really whoop. But you don't see those lines very often in these plots. So, but we made some extra effort to get another 15 workers reactivated because they had broken BIOS settings, something. And you see here that they are really unstable. Our build servers show their age. That's it's a truth that I don't need to hide because you can see that here. But they are still working, and here you can see that in 2 days they can build 30,000 packages for just one architecture, and we have 6 of them. So they have power, but they have to be maintained, and it's something that it's real work. So things we improved to, I'm very fast. Things we improved in the build service to get some deeper curves is we experimented with SSDs. We replaced the hard disks with SSDs of one machine, but we didn't get any improvements. Actually, the build times on average are slower there, and the reasons might be that the computers we put them in are of a different generation than SSDs. It's possible, but it's also possible that it has some problem, some reason we can fix, but so far we couldn't really. It's hard to say why it's slower. So we have created and maintained them so-called pre-install images. I'm not sure who noticed them. They are, one. The reason why we have them is if you build a package in the build service, it boots a clean, minimal VM and then installs in this VM the build dependencies of this package. And this process of installing like 400 packages for GNOME games is taking very long, but it's the same process for all the GNOME apps. So we have now an extra package that only installs build dependencies, then creates a tarball, and this tarball is then used for GNOME apps. So we have a set of, I think, a dozen pre-install images, and we pick the biggest one that has all the packages, and no extra packages, basically. So we have a minimal, a base, some X, Qt, GNOME, stuff like that. So we try to come up with a clever algorithm to find the best 12 sets, and we might need to fine-tune them in the future. But it's, on average, this brought over a minute, I think, for an average build job. So we have statistics on how how much time an average build job takes, and it were 8:20 before, and it's now like 7:30. So this is basically, if you look at the monitor page, that is on top of this, you see very often red ones that build for 3, 4, 5 hours, but usually most packages are done after 4 minutes. So the workers have the problem that they get stuck. They are under heavy I/O, and they are not the fastest machines, so they kind of, for some reason, decide to hold. They just get deadlocks, something. Stuff you could debug, but as we have so many different machines, it's very hard to put a lot of energy into debugging why the latest kernel doesn't work on this machine longer than 3 days. So we basically have a script that checks if the machine is still green, and if not, we trigger the remote power plug. And that's why this graph is relatively stable. It used to be much more that it was that it went down to 150 over the weekend because some workers didn't like us, and on Monday someone had to go down in the server room, find out what the problems are, and then it went back up, and now the script is running and it keeps above 250. There are still machines that love to lose their BIOS settings for whatever reason, and you then have to go downstairs and put some love into the rate controller settings and get it back. But it's okay. Yeah, this is what I already mentioned. We debugged quite some machines, some with more luck, some with less luck, but we replaced some hard drives that were causing the problems. We checked some power plugs, etc. That's the stuff we did. And we're begging for sponsors. We have a plan on how to promote build machine sponsors better in the build service, and we will deploy this after the conference and hope that if every build job says what the machine, who sponsored the machine the build job runs on, we can promote this sponsoring machines a bit better, so we can not necessarily get more machines, but replace the old ones with more powerful SSD stuff, and let's get it down to 6 minutes, for example, the average build job. So, one rather controversial thing in the project or between build service and me and the distribution in general is the way we rebuild stuff. Because currently, if we change the man page of GCC, which is a very favorite example of myself, we rebuild all of this. All of this. And this is really a hard to solve problem in general, because you can't well decide if a change in GCC is affecting other packages or not. There are clear cases where you can say it's not, and there are clear cases where you can say it does, if you have miscompilations or man pages, but there is a very big gray zone that is not necessary. For factories itself, we rebuild only the source changes and some build dependencies, and this works for 3 years or so pretty well, but it doesn't catch all the cases, so it requires a lot of manual checking, manual interactions, bug reporting, etc. And this kind of does not scale to every project. So this is something where we can put development time and concepts into how to find better way to avoid rebuilds. We have done in the past this build compare, which tries to find packages that haven't changed in the binaries, so that we know that they can't trigger rebuilds, that helped a bit, especially in publishing, but not necessarily, it won't change the GCC man page case, because the GCC man page change is a change in the binary, even though it's just a man page, but it still would rebuild everything. So another possible concept of avoiding problems is we could think about develop factory as we do maintenance updates. Maintenance updates, every change you do is developed in its own project, and then copy it into the main repository, the main update repository. But the updates don't build necessarily all against themselves. So this way you could say, okay, once GNOME factory is done, we copy it, the binaries from there into factory, stuff like that. It's a possibility. The third possibility I came up with is split factory into more projects and create snapshot repositories of those at different time frames, where you can, at the beginning of the month, you change GCC or system base, and more often you change GTK things, stuff like that. You could come up with strategies to solve that problem so that the GCC change can't affect the whole build farm that often. Another possibility. And fourth possibility to improve the build service for developing factory or developing openSUSE is the staging projects need to be handled better. Currently, they're linking all sources of factory and do some overlays. But if you then commit GCC into factory, you're not only triggering factory, but all the staging projects as well. So if you're, like Frederick does now, want to do an update of systemd, you have to wait for the GCC to bootstrap all the time, even though you're for sure don't touch GCC. But this is how the build service currently works. So there's some fun to be left in developing the build service to improve. So let's talk about schedules. This is stuff that I copied from Wikipedia. I didn't really verify it, but this is what Wikipedia says, and Wikipedia says always the truth. So the details are not so important here, but what you can see is that from this, we started, or Linux started, I didn't start SUSE, I don't want to say that, but SUSE started with having 3 releases every year, to then having 2 releases every year, to then roughly 8 months cycles. And now we talk about even less releases every year. If you look at the numbers of people downloading 12.3, it's, at first thought, it's very disappointing that not everyone rushes on the new release. But if you think about it, it's a compliment to the previous releases, because the 12.2, 12.1 still work. And so the general user, if asked, doesn't want to have 8-month cycles. On the other hand, the development would even need more releases a year so that we can rebase more often. So far, maintaining an X stack and KDE stack and GNOME stack on 4 different distributions in use is really tiresome. So there's some conflict between what users want, most users, I don't say that all of them share the same, and what developers want. So this is a discussion that was kind of not working on the mailing lists and wasn't really that much input, I would say. So I would like to have some discussions here at some both, possibly after Robert's so basically tomorrow. I already checked the wiki. So this is basically the only future cat I found. I put some food for thought on release schedules here. That is, Jos basically wants, emphasize tumbleweed. So that tumbleweed is basically the update the general user wants, and then the underlying system gets a much lower rate, like a year or even less, so that you get some mixture between release seldom and release later stuff. That's one possibility that sounds acceptable. Then you have the concept of removing all of GNOME, KDE, and X from the openSUSE distribution and have just the base stuff, and everything else you have to pick from repositories and mix your own openSUSE then all yourself. The same applies to what I called upstorification, where you create bundles for those applications and stacks that people want and put a nice label on it, but it's roughly the same what the previous is. The magic option is what many people that didn't put much thought about it as into the discussion, that is, we should release more often with less bugs and more stability and basically everything. I put it here because it was part of the discussion, but it's of course nothing that holds long while discussion. So, and the fifth option is, it was all fine, 12.2 was an anomaly and we're fine in the future. These are things that perhaps a mixture of all of those will be it at the end. I don't know. I don't really have a concrete proposal on how we should work. I'm fine with the current way we work if more people help and more people are aware of the general problems we have. But I'm fine with changes as we agree on them. That's basically my main condition. So now let's take some questions. Yes? Wait.
I would have one question. Would it be possible to somehow crowdsource the OBS? So some client can run an OBS part server and some stuff can be built on our personal PCs or on servers they are idling around.
So this is basically a question to some build service developer, and I'm only part-time doing that. But I know there are security implications with that, and there are bandwidth implications with that, because to build a package, if you ever build it locally with OSC, you have to download tons of stuff to just start. To build a very simple, very fast to compile Python package, you have to download like 400 megabytes. So for home PC, this wouldn't really work, I think. It might work, you can come up with stuff, but at first sight, it doesn't look beneficial to do that. If you have, there were quite some thoughts and concepts on putting it in some real cloud, where, for example, in Amazon's cloud was back then the hype of the day, where you could build the peaks. When you have a day where you have like 4 times as many packages to build as on normal days, you could boot up some cloud workloads and then work in there, because then some caching might make sense because you have all the power there and pay for it. So, but for a home PC, I don't think it's worth it. So, what was the second question?
So about the release schedule, just what I thought about it, when you have longer releases, longer time between the releases get more stable. But wouldn't this take value out of the Linux Enterprise?
SUSE Linux Enterprise does not become stable because it releases less often, but because the SLE departments have tons of engineers who fix bugs. So just because of not releasing it, it's not becoming more stable. This is some of the controversials that I am discussing with users and developers very often, because you can still, the software only becomes more stable by testing and fixing. And it's only tested and it's only fixed if it's interesting for the people. So it has to be releasing the beta, releasing an alpha, a milestone, has to be interesting. They have to download it and they have to really want to test it, and they really have to have interest in getting the things fixed. So you need some kind of momentum behind the distribution, even if it's not yet released. And this you only get by actually releasing it. So release more, what's the slogan? Release, early release often. And that's basically where users don't see the value of releasing often because the old ones work fine. The developers will get lost very soon if you're not releasing. So in Debian, for example, the developers are all on Debian testing and Debian unstable, and they don't care about Debian stable that much, but the users love Debian for Debian stable, or a lot of them. So that's what you always have to put into your thinking. There are not just users, there are both of them. And there are different users and there are different developers. So, well, no. So you too?
So I have more of a comment than a question, I guess. I think it's actually kind of sad that we're having this discussion about the release schedule, because a while back we spent a lot of time on how we should name our versions, what our release schedule should be, and there was a very long discussion at the time. And now we have one slip and we're going on and saying that was all useless, let's start over. And I am strongly opposed to this starting over. I think we have problems and I think we can fix them, and I have a couple of talks that go in that direction with proposals. And so I think any discussion of changing the release schedule at this point is premature, just because we slipped one release by a couple of months. So that is my feeling, and I feel pretty strongly about that.
But you are the reason we slipped. So, Klaus was erst. Jan? Klaus? No? Okay. Sorry.
Oh dear. Does this work? Yes, it works. Joining in with Robert actually here. I think there is a lot of good stuff that simply works, and you have to choose what fits your use. And I'm a dual personality user. I have that's my stable working place, which just needs to work and keeps working. I don't want Java to be thrown out all of a sudden or whatever. Sorry.
It's on, just a little closer.
Oh, a little closer, like this, or a little less. Okay. No, but I'm sort of a duality person in my use. I have it as a stable working place, and I have it as an experimentation place. Sometimes I'm having all this OBS stuff here, and sometimes I have just the stable stuff, and I go from 11.4, and I have waited very long with 12 because you couldn't log in properly. The famous bug that nobody ever did something about, I think. Anyway, you know, you have to choose, and you have VirtualBox if you want to have your experimentation place. Use that, use an extra partition. But what I think what would be very good if you were as a whatever user you are, developer or desktop user or laptop user, if you have choices where you say, okay, I'll subscribe to this update service because it fits my use. Very stable or very bloody edge, or even, you know, on a set of packages like I'm a developer, so I want a bloody edge on developing, but the word processor doesn't need to be updated. And I think you have to fit into what people want from you and not say, okay, we had a little problem with 12.2, so let's start all over again. That's stupid. Because then you keep throwing away what you just achieved. And you have to give the chance to grow on people, and then, you know, it's like reorganizing your business every 3 months. It's not smart. I think we should reorganize it every 3 or 4 years.
As I said, I don't have a problem with the current way we work. The only problem I have is that some people seem to be not taking part in it. And I'm thinking if I want basically to collect the feedback. Why? And if changes to the release schedule or changes to development process would help in getting them back in. So that's why I'm here.
So I think the release managers put too much on their shoulders. They take too much responsibility, and they should really spread out the responsibility to the different teams. And really, I mean, why is a GNOME project in OBS? Because the GNOME people want to be part of openSUSE. So put the responsibility on their shoulder. They have to fix the thing, they have to submit early. And if they don't reach the deadline, then you take an older release of GNOME, just as an example.
Yes, but the problem with the GNOME, or GNOME is not a very good example.
Take any other.
I'm thinking about a good example to underline my problem. The thing is, let's take GCC. Richard Günther is GCC developer. He's even in the release team of GCC, but he doesn't care at all what GCC package or what is the default in openSUSE. He doesn't care. He wants his GCC to be released because he's doing GCC for fun and for work, but he's not doing openSUSE for fun and work. It's not black and white, but let's put it this way. So, and the thing for me is, I have the release schedule, and it's not in my interest to slip. So I really want everyone to trust the schedules I put up. So I have, for 12.3, for example, I have 2 milestones that are my only variables. When can I take the new GCC update? So I need to talk to Richard when is GCC upstream ready, what his estimates are, and then I need to find people who make this integration work. I mean, so I can't put the responsibility on Richard's shoulder because he just, if I do this or if I try this, he says, I don't care. And then I have GCC not there. So
you need a team for GCC, and you need kind of volunteers who help to stabilize GCC. And if this doesn't happen, then openSUSE does not get a GCC update.
That's what happened with 4.12.2, and it worked, but this was in a staging project. And the staging projects, we have 6,000 packages, and one of them is GCC. So, and we can't have 6,000 staging projects. That's currently not possible. So we need some kind of sense of all these maintainers that are in openSUSE, of their responsibilities. And this is missing from a lot of those. And that's, you can't fix them. You can't fix this because most, I don't know, but I guess most of them put very little time in openSUSE. But still,
Who Who has an interest in getting new updates into openSUSE? Is this you as a release manager? So you send reminder mails and ask people, hey, please submit, and you watch for failed packages? Or is these the different maintainers who should have an incentive and an interest, hey, my latest package is in openSUSE?
So I think it's a mix. I mean, I think Kulow's doing a lot of work. I'm not sure it's in his interest to have the latest package in. I think in some cases it should be the developers, right? But as Kulow says, we have developers that don't really care, like Richard, right? But in that case, it should be the interest of the community, because we as the community produce the distribution, right? Kulow just fiddles it all together with magic. You know, so it should be in the interest of the community. And so if we have one developer that doesn't care whether his latest package is in a distribution or not, we need to find the strength within to say we have volunteers that now make sure that we get the latest package in. And so I agree with you that in a way we need to just stick to the schedule, and if as a community we can't meet the deadline, then instead of slipping the schedule, that one package doesn't go in. I agree with you. Right. 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 I agree. It should be the community, and I'm talking about some of those things in my later talk today. But so I agree with you that we should not slip the schedule. If a package is not in and it's not the latest, then well, so be it. I know we'll have users that will scream, "Oh, this is not the latest," and then we'll say, "Well, you could have helped." So, you know, I mean, yeah, in a way it's a lame excuse, but if we don't have enough people stepping up, you know, then so be it. I mean, the people that work on it are already doing more than, you know, can be expected in many cases.
One thing we need is better tooling support for showing stuff that needs to be done for specific targets. Let me take, for example, a new kernel. Everyone should have the interest in having openSUSE using the latest kernel, because the kernel kind of defines Linux, and if you use an old kernel, you're old. That's basically the package for a Linux distribution, I think. But if Jeff submits a new kernel, I know for sure, a new major update of the kernel, I know for sure that half of the kernel modules we have, the KMP packages, won't build because they change the kernel interface all the time. And the kernel upstream community says clearly, we are not interested in out-of-tree modules. But we have all these out-of-tree modules as packages, and some of those have been submitted for some strange hardware that is not even interesting for a general openSUSE user. So why would I block the latest kernel from being submitted just because it breaks iSCSI target or VirtualBox? so this is basically my problem that I have. I could theoretically, I could say, Jeff, it's your responsibility that all out-of-tree modules are fixed, or Xen is one of the worst examples there. I could tell him, it's your responsibility to fix all the out-of-tree modules before you can submit a new kernel. But then Jeff will also say, let's drop these. Why? I don't need them. And I would say, but I don't need them either, but I'm sure there are some people who need them. But then we're back and finding volunteers. And my experience with volunteers is that it's always the same guys that volunteer for such stuff.
Where's the maintainer who put the package in to begin with, right? If that maintainer has disappeared, then his package should disappear, and not everybody, you know, should, you know, you should not be expected to step in, or Jeff, or whomever, right? That doesn't work. So, and those are some of the changes I'm advocating later on today, or, well, one of my talks has moved tomorrow. So, but I think that's the stuff that we need to look at and not talk about the release schedule changes, right? I mean, those are the things we need to look at, and I think when we fix those things, we can keep to our 8-month schedule and we will not have any issues, and we can grow. We can still continue to scale. I mean, part of it was we got a lot of new contributions in 12.2 as well, I think, which at a scale that we hadn't really seen before. And I think we will continue to grow, and we have to make some changes at other levels, and we don't have to mess around with the release schedule. That's my thought.
Yeah, but there are, for 12.2, it was also this Ruby update, which caused tons of problems, because the maintainer of the Ruby package said, I'm fine with having the SLE 11 package on every openSUSE release, because the SLE guys always ask for updates, so I'm not happy to have 2 different Ruby versions. So, but he was the maintainer, and he was the only guy really being interested, and everyone else who used Ruby on openSUSE said, we want the latest Ruby, because all the libraries that appear are for the latest Ruby. So, this went on for, I don't know, since 2010 or something.
I don't think so. We have a group of Ruby developers, openSUSE-Ruby, who were interested in the latest Ruby and who were willing and able to fix bugs and build failures. So just move the responsibility to this group. This group has an interest for the latest package, and it's their responsibility, their task to make it happen, not a single maintainer.
In the end, it only happened because I did it, even though I tried to integrate this Ruby community from the beginning. So.
Sorry to interrupt the discussion, but the time is over for this, and there is a lunch now, so I think we can continue with the discussion over here maybe, but just to let the other people know that there's a lunch break now.
So please check the wiki. I will reserve a slot for the buff room tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.